My son-in-law tripped my wife. She hit her head on the floor and lost consciousness. He laughed, saying, "Don't pretend," and walked away. I called an ambulance, made another call, and said, "Activate our plan." Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. The truck door closed with a metallic thunk that echoed across my driveway. I stood there a moment, attorney Rick Donovan's manila folders still sharp in my mind. 3 months of documentation, witness statements, building code violations stretching back 2 years. My hand found the door handle, ready to head inside, when I heard the shouting. Arnold's voice cut through the evening air, sharp enough to slice. I turned toward my kitchen window and saw him standing over Helen, finger jabbing toward her face like a weapon. Her shoulders curved inward, defensive. My jaw tightened. 3 years of this man in our lives, and I'd watched my wife shrink a little more each time he walked through our door. I crossed the lawn in measured steps, each one deliberate. My free hand clenched, released, clenched again. Through the screen door, Arnold's words became clear. "You think bringing cookies makes you helpful? You're just a nosy old woman who can't accept that your daughter doesn't need you anymore. Nobody needs you." Helen's voice wavered. "I only wanted to help with little Maya, bring some groceries, be useful." "Useful?" Arnold cut her off. "Your kind of useful is suffocating. Clementine is sick of it. I'm sick of it." I stepped inside. The screen door's creak made Arnold's head turn, but he didn't stop, didn't even pause. "Tell her, Merle. Tell your wife she needs to stop meddling in our life." I moved between them, not aggressive, just immovable. A wall Helen could stand behind. "That's my wife you're speaking to, in my house. Choose your next words carefully." Arnold laughed, that cold, dismissive sound I'd come to recognize. He shifted his weight, arms crossing over his chest like a man preparing for a show. "Your house? Please. You're living on what, $2,000 a month? Clementine and I cleared that in a day last week. Don't lecture me about respect when you can't even support your own lifestyle without Social Security." The insult landed exactly where he'd aimed it. I felt Helen flinch behind me, felt her hand brush my elbow. But I didn't move, didn't speak, just looked at him. And something in my expression must have registered because his smile flickered. "Helen," I said quietly, "go upstairs." She hesitated. I could feel her weighing whether to argue, to apologize, to try smoothing this over the way she always did. Then her footsteps moved toward the staircase, soft on the old hardwood. Arnold watched her go, then turned back to me. "You think silence makes you tough? You think staring me down changes anything? I built a company from nothing. 3 crews, 18 employees, commercial contracts across 2 counties. What did you build, Merle? 30 years pushing paper at the utilities office? You should leave now." "I'll leave when I'm ready." But even as he said it, he was moving toward the door. He'd made his point, established his dominance, reminded me of my place in his hierarchy. That's what Arnold did. He needed everyone around him feeling small. At the threshold, he paused. "Tell Clementine I came by. Tell her I tried with you people. Again." The door slammed hard enough to rattle the frame. The sound hung in the air, sharp and final. Above me, I heard Helen crying, those quiet sobs she thought I couldn't hear. I stood in my kitchen, listening to my wife break apart 1 floor above, and ran through everything Rick had shown me this afternoon. Building permits filed under false information. Inspection reports altered after submission. Subcontractors filing liens for unpaid work. 3 different suppliers claiming Arnold had accepted materials, then disputed the invoices. The pattern was clear, systematic, documented. Rick had done thorough work. We had everything we needed. I walked to the foot of the stairs. "Helen, I'm going to make some tea. You want anything?" Her answer came muffled through the bedroom door. "No, baby, I'm fine." She wasn't fine. She hadn't been fine since Clementine married Arnold 4 years ago, since our daughter had slowly disappeared into his orbit, since every family dinner became a minefield of criticism disguised as concern. But Helen kept trying, kept baking cookies, kept offering to babysit Maya, kept calling Clementine every Sunday morning like ritual. I filled the kettle and set it on the stove, watched the blue flames circle the bottom. My reflection stared back from the window glass, a 64-year-old man with gray threading through his hair, lines deepening around his eyes, shoulders that still held straight from 2 decades of warehouse work before the utility job Arnold had dismissed so casually. But my reflection's eyes looked different tonight. Colder, more calculating, patient. Arnold's taillights disappeared around the corner 3 blocks down. I watched them fade, steam rising from the kettle's spout behind me. The whistle began its low build. Helen would come downstairs soon. She'd apologize for causing trouble, even though she'd done nothing wrong. She'd suggest calling Clementine tomorrow, trying to mend whatever imaginary fence Arnold claimed she'd damaged, and I'd hold her, tell her it would be okay, maintain the careful facade of a man accepting his diminished place in the world. But the folders from Rick's office sat in my truck. The evidence sat ready. And Arnold? Arnold had just given me the final piece I'd been waiting for. Not evidence this time. Motivation, clarity, the absolute certainty that what came next was not just justified, but necessary. I turned off the stove before the kettle could scream. 20 minutes later, Helen came downstairs. Her eyes were red but dry, her movements careful, like a person trying not to disturb fragile air. She paused at the bottom step. "I'm sorry for causing trouble tonight." I said nothing, just looked at her from my armchair, newspaper spread across my lap, unread. "I'll make us some coffee," she continued, needing to do something, needing to restore normalcy through routine. "Then maybe we can talk about how to handle this. I could call Clementine tomorrow, apologize for... You did nothing wrong." But she was already moving toward the kitchen, needing the familiar motions of measuring grounds, filling the reservoir, pressing buttons. I heard the machines gurgle and hiss. My newspaper remained open to the local section, words blurring. I was listening, waiting. My instinct proved correct when headlights swept across the front window. Arnold's car pulled into the driveway, the engine cut. Car door opened and closed with that expensive solid thunk of German engineering. But his footsteps didn't approach the front door. They moved around the side of the house, toward the entrance we never locked, the mudroom door that opened onto the hallway between kitchen and living room. Helen didn't notice. She emerged from the kitchen carrying 2 mugs, steam rising from both, her attention focused on not spilling. She was saying something about tomorrow's phone call, about maybe inviting Clementine and Maya for Sunday dinner next week, trying to weave normalcy from threads that kept unraveling. Arnold appeared in the hallway behind her, silent, positioned, waiting. Helen took 3 steps toward my chair, still talking, still carrying those 2 full mugs of coffee that had to be near boiling. She didn't see him, didn't sense him, was focused entirely on closing the distance between us, on this small gesture of connection. Arnold's foot shot out. The movement was quick, efficient, deliberate. His shoe connected with Helen's ankle mid-stride, her forward momentum already committed. There was no stumble, no chance to catch herself. She pitched forward, mugs leaving her hands, coffee arcing through the air in twin streams that caught the lamplight. Then the sound. Her temple struck the corner of the oak coffee table, that heavy piece we'd bought 30 years ago at an estate sale, solid wood with edges sharp as fresh-cut lumber. The impact made a wet crack that seemed too loud, too final. Helen crumpled. Coffee splashed across hardwood, soaked into the rug, but all I could see was blood, dark against her gray hair, spreading fast. I reached her in 2 strides, dropped to my knees, found the pulse point at her neck, with fingers that trembled despite everything. It fluttered there, weak but present. The wound at her temple bled freely, scalp wounds always did. But beneath that, I could see swelling already forming, skull fracture, had to be. Above us, Arnold laughed. That same cold sound from earlier, but pitched higher now, excited. "Let her stop pretending. Old people love drama, love the attention. She's fine. She'll get up in a minute." I grabbed a kitchen towel from the counter without standing, pressed it against Helen's temple. My other hand was already pulling my phone from my pocket, dialing with my thumb. 911, what's your emergency? My wife fell and hit her head. She's unconscious, bleeding from the temple. Pulse is weak. We need an ambulance. I gave our address, answered their questions about breathing, about position, about whether I could move her. "No, don't move her. Keep pressure on the wound. Stay on the line." Behind me, Arnold's voice changed. The laughter died. "It was an accident. She didn't look where she was going. You saw it. She tripped. If anyone asks, I wasn't here tonight. You tell them she fell on her own." I looked up at him then, met his eyes, held them. Whatever he saw in my face made him step backward, made the color drain from his cheeks, made him understand, perhaps for the first time, that he'd miscalculated something fundamental about who I was and what I was capable of becoming. "You tell them," he repeated, but his voice cracked. "I wasn't here." The door closed. His engine started. Taillights disappeared for the second time tonight. The paramedics arrived. I couldn't track time anymore. Couldn't tell if it had been 5 minutes or 20. They moved with practiced efficiency, stabilizing Helen's neck, checking vitals, asking questions I answered automatically. Possible skull fracture, significant trauma. Transport to Memorial Hospital immediately. They wheeled her toward the ambulance, and I stood in my doorway watching, blood drying on my shirt, coffee stains spreading across the floor behind me. One paramedic stayed back. "You riding with us, sir?" "I'll drive myself. Need to lock up. Grab her insurance information." He nodded, jogged to catch up with his partner. The ambulance doors closed. Lights began their rotation, painting my house in alternating red and white. Then they were gone, siren fading into distance. I pulled out my phone. One call. Rick answered on the second ring. "Rick, everything's in motion now. We can start. Activate our plan." His pause lasted 2 seconds. Then, "I'll make the calls. How bad?" "Bad enough." "I'm sorry, Merle." I ended the call, stood there holding my phone, looking at the blood on the floor, the overturned coffee mugs, the towel I'd dropped when the paramedics arrived. The house felt different now, not like a home anymore, like a crime scene. But I didn't start cleaning, not yet. First, I found Helen's purse on the kitchen counter, extracted her insurance card, photographed both sides with my phone, sent the images to my email. Then I sat down at the computer in our small office. The screen's glow, the only light in the dark house. My fingers moved across the keyboard with purpose. I wasn't crying, wasn't shaking. I was working, and the work had only just begun. I drove to the hospital through empty streets, 20 minutes of red lights and silence. The blood on my shirt cuff had dried to rust brown by the time I pulled into Memorial's parking garage. The waiting room smelled like industrial cleaner and burnt coffee. Plastic chairs lined walls painted that particular shade of beige that exists nowhere else in nature. I didn't sit, didn't approach the vending machine. Just stood near the admissions desk until they finally called my name. 6 hours after the ambulance took her away, they let me into room 312. Helen lay in the bed with rails raised on both sides like a child's crib. An IV ran into her left arm. Monitors beeped steady rhythms. Her eyes were open but unfocused, tracking slowly when I entered. The bandage at her temple stood out white against her skin. I took the chair beside her bed. The vinyls squeaked. "Merle?" Her voice came thick, uncertain. "Where am I?" "Memorial Hospital. You hit your head. You're going to be fine." She blinked slowly, processing. "I don't remember. What happened?" Before I could answer, the door opened. Dr. Patel entered with a tablet tucked under her arm, mid-40s with tired eyes that had seen too many overnight shifts. She nodded at me, then checked the monitors. "Mrs. Ferguson, I'm Dr. Patel. You have a moderate concussion with subdural bruising. We're keeping you for observation, likely 48 hours minimum." She tapped something on her tablet. "The impact pattern suggests you hit the corner of something at an angle. Coffee table? Was she carrying anything when she fell?" "Coffee," I said. 2 mugs. "Anyone else present?" "Just me." Dr. Patel's eyes lingered on my face a moment longer than necessary, making notes, recording details. Then she returned her attention to Helen, explaining medication schedules and observation protocols. Helen listened, nodding carefully like movement hurt. After the doctor left, Helen reached for my hand. "I'm so clumsy. You always tell me not to rush around." I squeezed her fingers gently, said nothing. The morning crawled forward. Helen dozed between vital checks. I sat in my chair, watching light shift across the floor as the sun rose higher. My phone stayed in my pocket, silent. I was waiting. Clementine arrived around 10:30. I heard her heels clicking down the corridor before she appeared in the doorway. She didn't hug me, didn't ask how I was holding up. She walked straight to the foot of Helen's bed and crossed her arms. "Mom, you have to be more careful. You're not young anymore. Hot coffee, rushing around. What if you'd been alone? What if Dad hadn't been there?" Helen's voice came small. "I know, baby. I'm sorry." You can't keep doing this to yourself. You need to slow down. Think before you act. I watched my daughter deliver her lecture, saw Arnold in every gesture, every inflection, the way she stood with weight on one hip, the slight head tilt that suggested disappointment rather than concern. Helen apologized again. Clementine sighed like she was dealing with a particularly difficult child. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I stood. I need to take this call. Clementine barely glanced at me. I stepped into the corridor, walked past the nurse's station to an alcove near the stairwell, checked over my shoulder before answering. First phase is active. Rick's voice carried satisfaction underneath the professional tone. The complaints are filed. IRS received documentation at midnight. State licensing got theirs an hour ago. Everything's authentic, everything's verified. Your signature is nowhere on any document. Timeline? IRS will move within 24 hours. They don't mess around with payroll tax evasion. State licensing typically takes 48 to 72 hours for inspection scheduling, but given the specifics, unlicensed subcontractors on active projects, documented building code violations on Riverside Drive, they'll prioritize this. I listened to Rick outline what I already knew, what we'd spent 3 months building. Since Arnold's first violent incident, when he'd shoved Helen against the kitchen counter and she'd blamed herself for standing in his way, I'd been gathering evidence. Rick had connections at the city planning office. We pulled permit records, cross-referenced contractor licenses, documented every violation. The Riverside Drive renovation alone had 18 separate code violations. Arnold used unlicensed electricians, unlicensed plumbers, paid them cash to avoid payroll taxes. $78,000 in unpaid taxes over 18 months. Anyone can file a complaint, Rick continued. Concerned citizen, anonymous industry source. The agencies don't care who reports as long as the evidence is solid, and ours is solid. Good. How's Helen? Concussion. They're keeping her 48 hours. Rick's pause lasted 2 seconds. I'm sorry, Merle. I ended the call and returned to room 312. Clementine was showing Helen photos on her phone, the granddaughter, family dinners, birthday parties we hadn't been invited to. Helen smiled weakly at each image. I moved to the window, looked down at the parking lot 3 floors below. Cars came and went. People hurried across crosswalks. Normal life continuing while mine followed a different trajectory. The IRS would move first. They always did with documented payroll tax evasion. Arnold's business accounts would be frozen pending audit. Without access to funds, he couldn't pay current crews. Projects would stall. Then state licensing would arrive for their inspection. Word would spread through Austin's construction community. It always did. Small industry, tight networks, everyone knew everyone. Arnold stressed about work. Clementine's voice cut through my thoughts. She was tucking her phone away, gathering her purse. Some paperwork issues. Nothing serious, but you know how he gets. I turned from the window. Does he? Clementine frowned at me. He's working through it. He always does. She kissed Helen's forehead. I'll check in later, Mom. Rest. Stop trying to do everything. After she left, the room settled into quiet. Helen's eyes found mine. I'm sorry I'm so clumsy. I keep causing problems. I moved to her bedside, took her hand again. You're not clumsy. You never were. I kept my voice gentle. Rest now. She drifted off within minutes. I stayed in my chair, watching her breathe, counting the steady beeps of monitors. My phone stayed silent in my pocket, but I knew it wouldn't last. Arnold had received his notifications by now. He'd be panicking, making calls, searching for answers. I checked the time, 2:15 in the afternoon. Soon, very soon. The phone buzzed at 2:47. Arnold's name lit the screen. I let it ring twice more before answering, then walked back to the corridor alcove. My back found the wall. My free hand slipped into my pocket. I got a letter from the state. Arnold's voice tried for strong, but landed somewhere near anxious. Someone filed a complaint about my business. Was it you? I'm sitting in a hospital room. My wife has a concussion. You asked how she is? Silence stretched between us. I could hear him breathing. That was an accident. She fell. Was it? The line went dead. I stood there a moment, phone still pressed to my ear, then pocketed it and returned to Helen's room. She was sleeping, monitors keeping steady rhythm. I settled back into my chair. Across town, Arnold sat in his home office surrounded by file boxes he'd pulled from closets, from under his desk, from the storage unit he rented for overflow documents. Papers scattered across every surface. He was searching for specific records, contractor licenses, project permits, tax documents. Everything was disorganized because he never expected anyone to look, never thought consequences applied to him. He found the letter from Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation first. Official letterhead, formal language, appointment scheduled for tomorrow morning, inspection of current projects, review of contractor credentials, verification of building permit compliance. The letter mentioned reported violations and regulatory compliance review, not routine. Routine inspections came with weeks of advance notice. Someone had reported him, someone with detailed knowledge. Arnold pulled out his phone, called his accountant. The conversation lasted 3 minutes. When he hung up, his hands were shaking. $78,000 in unpaid payroll taxes, plus penalties, plus interest. The accountant confirmed what Arnold already knew. The IRS didn't negotiate. They took what they were owed, and if you couldn't pay, they seized assets. Arnold didn't have $78,000 liquid. His money was in equipment, in materials, in projects that paid on completion. 3 active renovations, each one 50 to 60% finished. If the IRS froze his accounts, if state licensing found violations and shut down his projects, if clients started pulling contracts, he made himself stop thinking, focused on immediate problems, the inspection tomorrow. He could handle that. He'd handled inspections before, knew which inspectors responded to cash, which ones looked the other way for a good meal and some industry courtesy. But this letter felt different, targeted. Back at the hospital, I made my second call. Marcus Wheeler answered on the 3rd ring. "Marcus, it's Merle Ferguson, from Ferguson and Associates." A pause. "Merle? Been a while. 4 years?" "About that, I need to ask you something about Arnold." The temperature in Marcus's voice dropped 10 degrees. "Arnold, what's that piece of work done now?" I walked slowly through the hospital corridor while I talked, passing room after room of people dealing with their own crises. Mine just had better planning behind it. His company's under investigation, building code violations, licensing issues. When it becomes public, people will ask questions about his character, his business practices. And you want me to tell the truth about what he did to me. Only the truth, nothing more. Marcus had run a successful subcontracting business until Arnold undercut him on a major commercial project 2 years ago, forged Marcus's signature on a withdrawal letter, stole the contract. Marcus lost 3 clients before he could prove fraud. By then, the damage was done. He'd had to downsize, let good people go, rebuild from smaller projects. "What happened, Merle? This isn't about a business rivalry." I stopped walking, found myself in front of a window overlooking the parking lot. He put my wife in the hospital, then he laughed. The silence lasted longer this time. When Marcus spoke again, his voice carried weight I recognized, the sound of a man who'd been waiting for justice and just found out it might actually arrive. "You tell me what else you need." When word gets out about the investigation, his clients will get nervous. In construction, reputation is everything. If someone they respect, someone like you, confirms Arnold's unethical practices when asked, clients will make decisions. I'll do more than confirm if you need it. What he did to me, what he did to Helen. You point me where you want, Merle. Just the truth. That's all I need. You've got it. And Merle, you give Helen my regards. Tell her Carol and I are thinking about her. I ended the call and stood at the window a moment longer. The afternoon sun angled lower, painting the parking lot in amber light. Everything was moving exactly as planned. The IRS would freeze Arnold's accounts by 5 o'clock today. State licensing would inspect tomorrow. Marcus would be ready when clients started asking questions. The domino chain I'd spent 3 months setting up was falling, each piece tipping the next. I returned to Helen's room. She was still sleeping, her breathing steady and deep. I paused in the doorway, watching her, the bandage, the IV, the rails on her bed. Then I crossed to my chair and pulled out the small notebook I'd been carrying for 3 months. Found the page with check marks beside various items. Added 2 more. My phone buzzed with a text from Rick. IRS initiated audit. Account freeze effective 5 p.m. today. I read it, deleted it, pocketed the phone. Through the window, the afternoon continued its slow slide toward evening. Helen would be discharged tomorrow if her symptoms stabilized. She'd want to go home, to our house where coffee stains still marked the hardwood floor, where blood had soaked into the rug. I'd need to clean that before she saw it. But first, I had one more call to make tonight. I flipped to a page in my notebook marked Phase 2. 3 names, 3 addresses, 3 active projects. Arnold's current clients. I'd known their information for 3 months, ever since I'd started documenting everything. The first name, Stephanie Chen, residential renovation, Highland Park. I dialed. A woman answered on the second ring. Ms. Chen, my name is Merle Ferguson. I'm calling about your contractor Arnold. The night passed in the vinyl recliner beside Helen's bed. I didn't sleep, just watched monitors trace steady rhythms across dark screens. Listened to nurses make their rounds at 2-hour intervals. At dawn, new faces arrived, shift change bringing fresh sympathy in their nods. Helen woke around 7, ate some breakfast they brought on a beige tray. Oatmeal, toast, orange juice in a plastic cup. When can I go home? She asked for the 3rd time since yesterday. Doctor said maybe this afternoon if everything looks good. She nodded, picked at her toast. I held her hand. My phone sat face down on the bedside table, silent. I knew what was happening across town. I didn't need updates to see the machinery turning. At 9:47, the phone buzzed. I flipped it over. Marcus, inspectors arrived, 3 of them. I read the message, deleted it, set the phone back down. Helen was watching morning news, something about traffic on I-35. I looked out the window at Austin's skyline, morning sun painting glass towers in gold and amber. Somewhere out there, inspectors were walking through Arnold's office, examining files, checking contractor licenses against project records, finding what they'd come to find. Another text at 11:13. Marcus again. They found everything, unlicensed subs on all 3 projects. Riverside violations documented. He's trying to explain it away. Delete. Helen dozed, woke, asked if she could walk around. The nurse said yes, short distances. We made it to the window at the end of the corridor. Helen held my arm. Her steps were careful, uncertain. We stood together looking at the parking lot below. I feel so useless, she said, just lying there all day. You're healing. That's not useless. I miss our house, our bed. Soon. We walked back. She settled into bed again, exhausted from 30 feet of hallway. I adjusted her blanket, checked the time, nearly noon. Arnold's phone would be ringing, had been ringing. I'd made sure the emails reached his clients overnight. Public records, really, available to anyone who knew where to look. The IRS audit notice, the state investigation details, building code violations, just information, just facts. Construction clients don't tolerate risk. Their contracts have clauses about license violations, about regulatory compliance, standard protections. 3 active projects, 3 nervous clients looking at those clauses, making calculations. My phone buzzed 3 times in rapid succession. I didn't check, just watched Helen sleep, her breathing steady and peaceful. At 1:30, Arnold burst through the door, didn't knock, didn't acknowledge Helen, just stormed straight toward my chair, finger jabbing the air between us. You did this. The inspectors, the clients, this is you. I know it. I didn't stand, didn't move. Helen stirred, eyes opening. Arnold? Her voice came confused. What's wrong? I've been here since Saturday night, I said calmly. Ask the nurses. Ask anyone. A nurse appeared in the doorway, drawn by Arnold's volume. She frowned at him, then looked at me. Sir, he hasn't left except for coffee. He sleeps in that chair. Arnold's face twisted. He knew it was me, felt it in his bones. But there was no proof, no line connecting my hospital vigil to his collapsing business. His hands clenched and unclenched. What do you want? Money? I can pay you. Just tell me what you want. I want you to leave this room. My wife needs rest. Don't do this. My business, I'm losing everything. The inspector shut down 2 projects. The clients are canceling contracts. His voice cracked. Please. I looked at him. Said nothing. Helen pushed herself up on her elbows. Arnold, what's happening? What inspectors? State licensing, he said, still staring at me. Someone reported violations. Multiple projects. They're suspending my license pending review. That's terrible, Helen said. Can we help? Arnold ignored her. His eyes stayed locked on mine. Clementine will hear about this. She'll know you're destroying me on purpose. Will she? The two words landed like stones. Arnold's face went pale. He understood then, really understood, that there would be no negotiation, no terms, no ending until I decided there was an ending. You're going to take everything from me. You should go now. He backed toward the door, stopped at the threshold. This isn't over. Yes, I said quietly. It is. After he left, Helen looked at me with wide eyes. What was that about? Why was he so angry? I don't know, honey. He seemed stressed about work. Should we help him? Maybe you could give him advice. You know construction. You worked with contractors for years. Let's focus on getting you better first. She nodded, settled back against her pillows. Within minutes, she was asleep again. My phone buzzed. Rick. Inspection complete. Multiple violations confirmed. License suspension pending review. Delete. Marcus. All 3 contracts terminated. Highland Park project shut down this morning. He's scrambling to find new clients, but nobody's returning calls. You wanted the truth out there? It's out there. Delete. I sat in my chair, watching Helen breathe. The afternoon sun slanted through blinds, painting bars of light across her bed. Everything was proceeding exactly as it needed to. Arnold's business was collapsing in real time, his reputation spreading through Austin's construction community like ink through water. By tomorrow, everyone would know. By next week, he'd be unemployable. I picked up my phone, scrolled through the deleted messages folder, made sure nothing remained, cleared the cache, set it back down. Helen's hand twitched in sleep. I covered it with mine, felt her pulse steady and strong beneath her wrist. She'd offered to help Arnold. Even after everything, her instinct was kindness. That's who she was. That's who she'd always been. That's why I was doing this. 2 hours after Arnold left, I received a call asking me to come to a consultation room on the 2nd floor. I told Helen it was about discharge paperwork, a small lie to keep her from worrying. She nodded, already half asleep again. I took the elevator down, found room 204. 2 Austin police officers waited inside. Martinez, late 30s with tired eyes, and Kowalski, older, arms crossed over his chest. Mr. Ferguson? Martinez gestured to a chair across from them. Thanks for coming down. We need to ask you some questions about a complaint we received. I sat, folded my hands on the table. What kind of complaint? Your son-in-law, Arnold, filed a harassment report. He claims you've been making threats against him and his business. Says you're retaliating because of some family dispute. Kowalski leaned forward. He also suggests you might be behind some regulatory investigations into his company. Says the timing is suspicious. Your wife gets hurt, immediately after his business gets reported to state licensing and the IRS. I've been here, I said, at this hospital with my wife since Saturday night. The medical staff can confirm. We're not accusing you of anything yet, Martinez said. Just gathering information. What's your relationship with Arnold like? Strained. Why is that? I paused, chose my words carefully. He put my wife in this hospital. It wasn't an accident. The officers exchanged glances. Martinez pulled out a notebook. You're saying her fall was intentional? I'm saying he deliberately tripped her. I saw it. She was carrying 2 mugs of coffee. He came into our house through the side door, waited until she walked past, and kicked her ankle. She hit her head on the corner of our coffee table. Kowalski's arms uncrossed. Why didn't you report this immediately? My wife was unconscious and bleeding from her temple. I called 911. That was my priority. Everything else came second. Can you prove what you're saying? Martinez asked. Any witnesses besides you? No, it's my word against his, but you can see the medical reports, the impact pattern. Ask the doctors how she fell. The door opened. Rick walked in with his briefcase, nodded to the officers, sat beside me. Rick Donovan, Mr. Ferguson's attorney. What's the nature of this interview? Martinez explained Arnold's complaint. Rick opened his briefcase, pulled out documents. My client has made no threats against Mr. Arnold. Here are complete phone logs. No calls to Arnold except one on Saturday night, calling emergency services. Here are hospital records showing Mr. Ferguson's continuous presence since admission. Here are statements from nursing staff confirming he hasn't left this floor except for coffee. Rick slid the papers across the table. Where's the harassment? Kowalski examined the documents, looked up at me. Arnold says you've been orchestrating a campaign against him, getting people to file complaints, turning his clients against him. I've been here, I repeated, taking care of my wife. Martinez closed his notebook. We're not pursuing charges, Mr. Ferguson. There's no evidence supporting the complaint, but I'd recommend you avoid contact with Arnold going forward. Gladly. After the officers left, Rick gathered his papers. Arnold's grasping. He knows he can't prove anything, but he's trying to create a counter-narrative. He paused. It won't work, but there's something else you should know. The bank called in his loan. What loan? Business line of credit, $340,000 outstanding. The bank's risk management team learned about the IRS audit and license suspension. Material adverse change clause. They're demanding immediate repayment. Can he pay it? Rick shook his head. Not a chance. His equipment might cover $200,000 if he sells quickly, but his projects are canceled. Revenue stream is gone. He's trapped. What will he do? Sell everything, declare bankruptcy, or find someone to bail him out? Rick met my eyes. He's finished, Merle. Completely finished. I returned to Helen's room. She was awake, watching television, some cooking show with bright colors and cheerful hosts. She smiled when I entered. Everything okay with the paperwork? All sorted. I sat beside her bed. My phone showed 3 new messages, but I didn't check them. Not yet. The nurse said Arnold came by earlier, Helen said. She said he seemed very upset. Work troubles. Maybe we should help him. He's Clementine's husband. He's family. Her eyes searched my face. Family should help family. I took her hand. Some people need to solve their own problems. But if we could, Helen, my voice came gentle but firm. Right now, we focus on getting you home, getting you better. Everything else can wait. She nodded, though worry creased her forehead. I just don't want Clementine to suffer because of whatever's happening with his business. Clementine is stronger than you think. Helen squeezed my fingers. You're probably right. You usually are. I adjusted her blanket, made sure the television remote was within reach. The evening news was starting, local anchors discussing weather patterns, traffic updates, the ordinary rhythm of the world continuing, while mine followed its own trajectory. My phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. A text from Marcus. Banky recall confirmed. 15 days to pay. He's trying to liquidate equipment, but nobody's buying at his prices. Word is out. I deleted the message, set the phone face down again. Helen had fallen back asleep, her breathing steady and peaceful. The cooking show played on, someone explaining the proper way to caramelize onions. Slow heat, patience, time. I looked at my wife, the bandage still white against her temple, the IV still feeding fluids into her arm. She'd wanted to help Arnold. Even after everything, her instinct was compassion. That's the difference between us, I thought. Helen sees the best in people, believes in redemption. Forgiveness. I see consequences, actions and reactions, debt and payment. Arnold made his choices. Now he was living with them. The inspections, the client exodus, the bank recall, none of it was revenge. It was simply information coming to light, the truth finding its way to people who needed to know it. I hadn't filed the complaints myself, hadn't called his clients, hadn't contacted the bank. I'd just made sure the right people had access to the right information at the right time. Everything else was gravity, natural law. What goes up must come down. What's built on lies must eventually fall. My phone rang. I checked the screen. Clementine. I stood, walked into the corridor, answered. Dad. Her voice sounded different, not cold or accusatory, scared. Arnold says you're destroying his business. Helen came home that afternoon. The discharge process took 2 hours. Paperwork, medication instructions, a nurse wheeling her to the car while reciting warnings about dizziness and balance. I drove carefully, watching her from the corner of my eye. She looked out the window, quiet. When we pulled into the driveway, she turned to me. Thank you for cleaning. I helped her inside, settled her on the couch with pillows and blankets. She'd noticed immediately. The floor where coffee had splashed, where blood had pooled, both gone. I'd scrubbed them yesterday while she slept, on my knees with bleach and hot water, working the stains until the hardwood looked like nothing had ever happened there. You didn't need to do all that, she said. I just nodded. Evening came slowly. Helen dozed on and off. I sat in my study with the door cracked open, book in my lap, phone on the desk, waiting for something I couldn't quite name. The next move, the inevitable response to pressure. Across town, Arnold was making calls. I didn't see this, but I learned about it later. He spent the afternoon contacting equipment dealers, trying to liquidate machinery. 3 calls. The first offered $70,000 for equipment worth double that. The second wanted to wait and see how things shake out. The third didn't answer. Then he called business contacts, men he'd worked with for years, shared beers with after difficult projects, laughed with at industry conferences. Every response carried the same careful distance. Sorry, can't help right now. Marcus's influence spread through the construction community like oil through water, silent, thorough, deadly. By evening, Arnold understood. His reputation was finished. At his house, Clementine was waiting when he walked in. She'd been crying, eyes red, tissue balled in her fist. I talked to my father. Arnold's stomach dropped. He tried to maintain composure, but his face betrayed him. Were you there Saturday night when Mom fell? I stopped by earlier. I wasn't there when it happened. Clementine's expression hardened. You're lying. I can hear it in your voice. You've been lying about everything, haven't you? Your father is manipulating you. He's destroying my business and turning you against me because he needs someone to blame for your mother's clumsiness. The words sounded hollow, even as he spoke them. Clementine stood, grabbed her purse from the counter. I'm going to stay at a hotel tonight. I need to think. Clem, wait. But she was already moving toward the door. She didn't slam it, just closed it quietly, deliberately. The soft click was more final than any dramatic exit. Arnold stood alone in his living room, listening to her car start in the driveway, listening to it fade down the street. Back at my house, Helen emerged from the living room. She moved carefully, one hand on the wall for balance, pausing in the doorway of my study before entering, each step measured, deliberate. Merle? I looked up from my book, the same page I'd been staring at for 30 minutes. She sat in the chair across from my desk, the same chair clients used to sit in when I ran my consulting business from home, back before retirement. Her hands folded in her lap. Tell me what happened Saturday night, all of it. Don't protect me. I need to know. I set down the book, looked at my wife of 41 years. Her bandage was smaller now. They'd changed it before discharge, but still white against her temple. I told her everything. Arnold's return through the side door, her walking toward me with coffee, his foot shooting out, the deliberate trip, the fall, the crack of her head against oak, his laughter, his words about pretending, about drama, about old people, his demand that I say she fell alone. Helen listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was crying quietly. Not from pain, from understanding. How long? She asked. How long have you known he was cruel? 3 months, since he pushed you in the kitchen and you told me you backed into the counter. Helen covered her mouth, her eyes closed. She was remembering. The bruised hip she'd blamed on her own clumsiness. The way she'd apologized for being in Arnold's way when he was trying to leave. But there was no counter where she'd fallen. I'd seen his hand on her shoulder, the shove. Helen stumbling sideways, catching herself on the stove. I'd said nothing then, just helped her up, got her ice, and started planning. I lied to you, she said. I was embarrassed. I know. What have you done? It wasn't an accusation. It was a question, simple, direct, needing an answer. What needed to be done? Helen reached for the tissue box on my desk, wiped her eyes. How bad is his situation? I told her factually. License suspended, projects canceled, bank loan called, $340,000 due in 15 days. Reputation destroyed, equipment barely sellable, no income, no prospects. He'll lose everything, she said. Yes. She processed this, sat quietly for a long moment. Then, good. The word surprised both of us. Helen Ferguson, who always saw the best in people, who'd wanted to help Arnold just hours ago in the hospital, said it again. Good. He hurt me on purpose and laughed about it. He needs to understand that has consequences. She reached across the desk. I took her hand. But what happens now? She asked. Will he give up? No, desperate men don't give up. They make mistakes. My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Arnold's voice came broken, rough. We need to talk. I looked at Helen. She nodded. "Tomorrow," I said. 4 in the afternoon, room 312 at St. David's. "The hospital? Why?" "Because that's where my wife almost died because of you. If you want this to end, that's where it ends." I disconnected. Helen asked, "What will you say to him?" "Whatever needs to be said." That night, neither of us slept much. I sat up reading case files Rick had sent. 3 months of documentation, thick as a phone book. Helen lay beside me, staring at the ceiling. Around 3 in the morning, she asked, "Do you think Clementine will forgive us?" I set down the papers. "Eventually, after she understands what he is." "And what if she chooses him?" I didn't answer. Some questions don't have good answers. Arnold didn't sleep. He spent the night in his office chair, surrounded by financial statements and business documents. He tried calculating scenarios: sell equipment for $70,000, liquidate material inventory for maybe 30. That's 100 against 340. Even bankruptcy wouldn't save him. There was personal liability on the business loan. He'd signed personal guarantees. Dawn came. He was still sitting in the same chair, wearing yesterday's clothes. At 8:47, certified email arrived from Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation. He opened it on his phone, read the official notification. His contractor's license was suspended effective immediately. He could not legally operate his business, sign contracts, or supervise construction until violations were resolved. The list was detailed: 3 counts of using unlicensed subcontractors, 4 building code infractions, failure to obtain proper permits. Each required a formal hearing. Timeline: minimum 90 days, likely longer. At 9:15, his bank emailed. The IRS had placed a levy on his business account. All funds frozen pending tax audit resolution. He couldn't access his own money, couldn't pay the 2 employees still on payroll, couldn't make loan payments. Arnold drove to 3 equipment dealers before noon. Best offer, $65,000 for machinery he'd bought for $180,000. He didn't accept. Still hoping for better, though he knew better wouldn't come. He called former clients, the ones who'd terminated contracts, asked if they'd reconsider. They'd already hired other contractors. One mentioned Marcus's name casually. "Marcus Wheeler said you're unreliable. That's good enough for me." Arnold sat in his truck, staring at his phone. Marcus was actively working against him. He dialed Marcus's number. Marcus answered on the first ring. "You're calling me for help? That takes nerve." "Marcus, please. I'm calling to apologize. What I did 2 years ago was wrong. I need..." "Save it. You forged my signature and stole my contract. Cost me 3 clients before I could prove fraud. Now you want sympathy? I'm losing everything." "Good. You made your choices. Now live with them." Click. Arnold sat in a parking lot somewhere. He couldn't remember which one. Hadn't been paying attention when he pulled in. His phone showed 2:47, 13 minutes until he needed to leave for the hospital. He thought about not going, about driving away, starting over somewhere else. But where? With what money? His credit cards were maxed. His business account was frozen. Clementine wasn't answering his calls. The only path forward went through Merle Ferguson. Arnold started the truck. I arrived at the hospital at 3:30. Helen was home recovering. I wasn't visiting anyone. But I'd told Arnold to come here, to room 312, where Helen had spent 2 nights because of him. I took the elevator to the 3rd floor, walked the familiar corridor, passing nurses who recognized me from my vigil. They smiled sympathetically. I didn't explain why I was back. Room 312 was occupied by someone else now, an elderly man recovering from surgery. His family gathered around him. I didn't go in, just stood in the hallway outside, arms crossed, back against the wall, waiting. Arnold emerged from the elevator at 3:45, 15 minutes early. He looked broken, unshaven, clothes wrinkled, shoulders slumped. He wandered the corridor checking room numbers, not approaching me yet. Building courage, or maybe just delaying the inevitable. I watched him stop at the water fountain. He didn't drink, just stood there, hand hovering over the button. At exactly 4 o'clock, he finally approached, stopped a few feet away. We looked at each other. He tried to speak. His mouth opened, no sound came out. He closed it, tried again. "What do you want from me?" His voice was hoarse, cracked. I looked at the door to room 312, then back at him, gestured toward the nearby consultation room, the same one where police had interviewed me. "Inside." "Just tell me what you want. Money, an apology. I'll do whatever. Inside, now. Arnold hesitated, then followed. The room was small. Table, 4 chairs, nothing else. I closed the door behind us. The click echoed. Sit down. Arnold sat. His body seemed to collapse into the chair rather than sitting deliberately. I remained standing, arms crossed. Do you know what room that was? 312? I don't. That's where my wife spent 2 nights. Concussion, subdural bruising. Because you thought it would be funny to trip her. Arnold's hands trembled on the table. It was a stupid mistake, a moment of anger. I didn't mean for her to get hurt that badly. You laughed. You told me to say she fell on her own. You left her bleeding on my floor. I panicked. I'm sorry. What do you want me to do? I'll sell everything. I'll pay you. Just tell me how to make this stop. I pulled out a chair, sat across from him. The configuration was familiar, same as when the police questioned me, but the roles were reversed now. I want you to understand what consequences feel like. Arnold stared at me. His eyes were red-rimmed, desperate. You've destroyed me, my business, my reputation, my marriage. You win. Just tell me what happens next. I placed a folder on the table, thick manila, stuffed with documents. Arnold's eyes fixed on it. What is that? I opened it slowly. This is 3 months of documentation. Every violation you've committed, every code you've broken, every tax you haven't paid, every subcontractor you've used illegally, every contract you've manipulated. I slid it across the table. Arnold flipped through pages with shaking hands, his forged signatures, photographs of unlicensed workers on job sites, tax forms showing unpaid obligations, building code violations documented with dates and locations. The state has copies, the IRS has copies, your bank has copies, and I have the originals. Arnold looked up, face pale. But there's more. I pulled out a second document from my jacket, single page, typed, unsigned. This is a written statement about what happened Saturday night, dated and waiting for my signature. If I sign it and give it to the police, they'll reopen the investigation as assault. With Helen's medical records and my testimony, there's enough for charges. I let this sink in. Arnold's breathing had gone shallow. So, when you ask what I want you to understand that I could have had you arrested. I could have destroyed you without touching your business. But I wanted you to lose everything you built first. The way you made Helen feel worthless. Now you know how that feels. Arnold's hands trembled as he set the papers down. The folder sat between us on the table. Evidence of 3 months of documentation. Building code violations, unpaid taxes, forged signatures. Everything that could destroy him, organized and cataloged. He tried to salvage something, anything. Helen interfered too much in our lives. She needed to understand boundaries. It was meant to be a warning, not a warning. I cut him off. You put a 62-year-old woman in the hospital as a warning. I didn't mean for her to hit her head that hard, but you meant for her to fall, and you laughed. Arnold shifted tactics, leaned forward, attempting aggression. You've destroyed my business over an accident. You're taking revenge that's beyond reasonable. You're the one who's... I documented your violations and reported them. Your business destroyed itself through your choices. I just made sure people knew the truth. You orchestrated this whole thing. You wanted me destroyed. I wanted you to face consequences. There's a difference. He tried desperation next. Please, tell me what you want. Money I don't have, but I can get. An apology, I'll give you. Just tell me what will make this stop. I didn't respond. Let the silence stretch. 30 seconds, a minute. Arnold began to crack. Say something, anything, just tell me. I held up one hand. He stopped mid-sentence. I stood slowly, walked to the small window overlooking the parking lot, my back to him. Let him wait some more. Do you know what room number this is? What? I turned. The consultation room where we're sitting. Do you know what's 50 feet down that hallway? Arnold shook his head. Room 312, where my wife spent 2 nights with a concussion because you thought it would be funny to trip a 62-year-old woman. Something in Arnold finally shattered. He stood abruptly, moved toward the door, not to leave, but because he couldn't sit still anymore. His hands moved uselessly, grasping at nothing. It wasn't funny. I was angry. She kept... He stopped, realized there was no sentence that ended well. He leaned against the wall, then slowly slid down until he was sitting on the floor. Not crying yet, but his breathing had gone ragged. I'm losing everything. My business is gone. Clementine left. I don't even have money to pay my phone bill next month. You've taken everything from me. I returned to the table, sat. No, you gave it away. Every corner you cut, every tax you skipped, every lie you told, those were your choices. I just made sure they had consequences. I opened the folder again, pulled out a separate document. Arnold watched from the floor, eyes tracking my movements. The Riverside Drive project. You forged change orders to bill the client for materials you never purchased. That's fraud. The documentation is clear. Your signature, the false invoices, the actual receipts showing different materials. I held up the papers so he could see. The state doesn't have this yet. Neither does your client. If I provide it to the district attorney, that's criminal charges, 2 to 10 years. Arnold's face went white. How do you even... I know people in construction. I've known them longer than you've been in business. When I started asking questions, they were happy to help. You're not well liked, Arnold. He covered his face with his hands. His shoulders shook. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. What do you want from me? Just tell me. I'll do anything. I stood. Come with me. Arnold looked up, confused. Where? Room 312. He didn't move. Helen's not even there anymore. You said she was discharged. She came back. She wanted to be here for this. Arnold shook his head. I can't face her. My voice dropped. You didn't give her a choice when you tripped her. Now you don't get one either. Stand up, walk with me, or I make a phone call to the DA right now. I stepped into the hallway. Behind me, I heard Arnold push himself to his feet using the wall for support. His footsteps followed, unsteady. The walk to room 312 took 30 seconds. A nurse passed us, glanced at Arnold's disheveled appearance with concern, but kept walking. Hospital sounds surrounded us. Distant beeping, soft conversations, the squeak of shoes on linoleum. I stopped outside the door. It was partially open. Through the gap, Arnold could see Helen sitting in the visitor's chair. Not in the bed. She was here by choice, wearing regular clothes, a bandage still visible on her temple. She looked at him through the opening. No expression, just waiting. I pushed the door fully open and stepped inside. Didn't check if Arnold was following. He had no choice now. He entered. Rick Donovan sat in the corner with a briefcase on his lap. Arnold hadn't noticed him at first. His attention was fixed on Helen, on the small room that suddenly felt even smaller. Rick nodded professionally. Mr. Arnold. I gestured to the empty chair across from Helen. Sit. Arnold sat. I remained standing, positioned between him and the door. Subtle, but clear. Here's what happens now. I kept my voice level, factual. First, you will write and sign a full confession. You deliberately tripped Helen on Saturday night. It wasn't an accident. You intended to hurt her, and you laughed about it. Rick will witness the signature. Arnold started to protest. I continued. I'm not asking, I'm telling. Second, medical expenses, $12,000, emergency services, hospital stay, medications, follow-up appointments. You pay all of it. Third, compensation. You'll sell your equipment and pay Helen $50,000 for what you did to her. $50,000? Arnold's voice cracked. I don't have that kind of money. Even if I sell everything. Rick opened his briefcase, pulled out papers. Your equipment inventory, based on current market assessments, will yield approximately $65,000 in liquidation. After the $12,000 in medical expenses, $50,000 remains. The math works. Arnold looked at Helen. Please, I'm sorry. I know I was wrong, but taking everything I have left... Helen's voice came quiet but firm. You took my dignity when you laughed at me bleeding on my own floor. $50,000 doesn't buy that back, but it's what Merle is asking for. So that's what you'll pay. I continued. Fourth, you disappear from our lives, permanently. No contact with Helen or me. No showing up at family events. If Clementine wants a relationship with her parents, that's her choice. But you don't interfere. You don't speak about us. You don't blame us for your failures. You're simply gone. You're taking my wife too? I'm not taking anything. Clementine makes her own choices, but if she asks me what happened, I'll tell her the truth. All of it. Arnold slumped in his chair. And if I agree to all this, Rick answered, Mr. Ferguson won't provide the Riverside Drive fraud evidence to the district attorney, and I'll negotiate with the IRS for a payment plan on your tax debt. You'll still owe it, but you won't face criminal charges for evasion. Rick produced documents from his briefcase, a written statement, spaces for Arnold's signature and date. "Read it aloud first," I said. Arnold's hands shook as he held the paper. He read, voice breaking with each word. "I, Arnold, on June 15th, 2025, deliberately tripped Helen Ferguson in her home. This was not an accident. I intended to cause her to fall. When she hit her head and lost consciousness, I laughed and left. I told Merle Ferguson to say she fell on her own. I am responsible for her injuries." He looked up. "If I sign this, you could use it against me. This is a confession to assault." Rick's tone remained professional. "Mr. Ferguson's word that he won't pursue charges. You're welcome to refuse and take your chances with the fraud prosecution instead." Arnold signed. His hand barely moved. The signature was shaky, almost illegible, nothing like the confident scrawl I'd seen on forged documents. Rick witnessed it, added his own signature and notary seal. I watched without expression. Then I spoke, and for the first time, emotion entered my voice. Not anger, but something colder. "I've been preparing for this since the first time you hurt Helen. 3 months ago, in our kitchen, when you pushed her and she bruised her hip. She told me she backed into a counter. I saw your hand on her shoulder. I saw the shove. That's when I started gathering evidence, documenting violations, building the case. I just waited for you to go too far." Arnold looked stricken. 3 months? I wanted you to feel secure, to believe you'd gotten away with it. Then, when you'd committed enough violations, I would make sure everyone knew who you really were. Saturday night was just the trigger I needed. Arnold set down the pen like it weighed 50 pounds. His hands fell to his lap. Rick collected the documents, placed them in his briefcase. "The medical payment is due within 7 days. Equipment sale and compensation within 30 days. I'll send you payment instructions." Arnold nodded numbly. I finally moved from my position by the door. "You can go now." Arnold stood, looked at Helen one more time. She didn't meet his eyes. He walked to the door, stopped. "I really am sorry." Nobody responded. He left. I sat in the chair Arnold had vacated across from Helen, took her hand. We sat in silence for a moment, then footsteps in the hallway, rapid, purposeful. The door opened. Clementine stood there, breathless. Her eyes were red. She must have been nearby, perhaps in the cafeteria or parking lot. "Mom," she moved past me, knelt beside Helen's chair. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I didn't want to believe it, but I talked to the hospital staff. They told me when Dad came by on Saturday. He lied to me about everything." She was crying now. "Can you forgive me?" Helen touched her daughter's face. "You're here now. That's what matters." Clementine looked at me. "Dad, I shook my head slightly. "We'll talk later. Right now, be with your mother." Clementine nodded, rested her head on Helen's lap. Mother and daughter reconciled. I stood quietly, moved toward the door. Rick followed. In the hallway, he spoke low. "That was 3 months of work. It's finished." I looked back through the door's window, Helen and Clementine together, the relationship healing. "Yes, it's finished." We walked toward the elevator. Through the hospital's western windows, the Austin sunset painted the sky orange and pink. The city continued its evening, unaware of the small justice delivered in room 312. I pressed the elevator button. The door opened. I stepped inside. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.